I'm Katherine Busch. I am from Missouri State University. I am an English education major with a minor in theater. I wrote this paper for American Literature 2 with Dr. Matthew Kalaman. The title of my paper is There Will Be Time, Prufrock and Passivity. T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock is perhaps the last poem one would pick for a romantic evening of poetry recitation. While the title creates an expectation of a passionate ballad, the speaker proves to be far from a romantic hero. Throughout the poem, Prufrock demonstrates a trend toward passivity and impotence. He consistently fails to act. This is implicit in both the content and the poetic form itself. The anticipation of a love story is crushed by the harsh reality of uselessness and inactivity, which hinders any chance of romance. This subversion of the love song indicates that the modern world surrounding Prufrock is no longer a hospitable environment for intimacy. Intimacy is made irrelevant or dwarfed by the titanic changes in the modern world. He is the stagnant individual in a drastically transforming setting. The poem begins with a passage from Dante's Inferno in which Guido de Montefeltro confesses his crimes to Dante because they are both damned in hell. From the very beginning, there's a sense of entrapment. The dialogue is between two people who presumably cannot leave their current circumstances. Montefeltro certainly has missed his opportunity to act. He is in hell for not repenting, a crime of omission, not commission. He is condemned for what he did not do and will never be able to act again. Thus, before Eliot's lines even start, the reader is faced with an example of someone who is stuck in passivity. De Montefeltro failed to act in life and now cannot do so in death. Hugh Hefner offers a further parallel, claiming that the poem is, quote, a liaison between Dante's journey through hell and Prufrock's journey through the city streets, end quote. This claim of the modern city as analogous to hell furthers the idea that the modern world has created the stagnation that Prufrock experiences as the poem proceeds. Prufrock resides in a stasis of passivity. From the third line of the poem, there's a theme of sleepiness or dreamlike existence, quote, like a patient etherized upon a table, end quote. This image immediately evokes a sense of numbness and listlessness. This imagery continues in the third stanza as the speaker describes the, quote, yellow fog which lingered upon the pools that stand in drains and curled once about the house and fell asleep, end quote. Ray Peterson, in The Women Come and Go, Sonnet Cycles, and T.S. Eliot and E.E. Cummings, offers the addition that, quote, doubtlessly, Eliot's fog/cat imagery is memorable, evocative, and effective in setting the concurrent tones of bleakness and lethargy that pervade the poem, end quote. Again, there is sleep imagery in the description of lingering rather than actively moving. Even when the fog makes a, quote, sudden leap, it sees that it is a, quote, soft October night and immediately sleeps. This imagery continues on lines 75 through 77. Quote, and the afternoon, the evening sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or it malingers, end quote. The use of the ellipses in line 77 create a slow, dragging pace as a reader's eye must scan through the punctuation to reach the words. The final two stanzas as well seem to be a fantasy or daydream. Prufrock fleetingly imagines himself as Odysseus, but this fantasy does not lead him to any new epiphany or action. J.S. Brooker furthers this claim, adding that, quote, Prufrock, not the evening, is etherized upon a table. Like everything else in the poem, the tired, sleepy evening is an aspect of Prufrock's mind. The poem also demonstrates a reliance on memories from the past and expectations for the future rather than actions in the present. Donald J. Childs claims that, quote, the first three lines of the poem, therefore, suggest the etherized abdication of goal-oriented consciousness, an abdication that allows the uncontrolled descent of the particular memories and images that haunt Prufrock throughout the poem and thwart action at every turn, end quote. Many lines are told in past tense, such as, quote, for I have known them all already, known them all, have known the evenings, mornings, and afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons, end quote. He speaks as if his life has already ended, as if it is completed and can now be measured, when it actually continues in a kind of meaningless unconsciousness. The present seems to exist solely to reflect on the past. These lines imply a finiteness, as if there is nothing left to know, and therefore no need to act. He then presents the image of his head, grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter. This picture of Prufrock's head being separated from the body furthers the distinction that his head can be incredibly active and contemplative, while having no effect whatsoever on his inactive body. Along with these images of the past are those of the future. The fourth stanza elicits the idea of a future time. Prufrock claims, quote, and indeed there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the streets, and adds, quote, there will be time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hand, end quote. Prufrock seems to rely on the potential of the future rather than the present. There's also a fear of the future. He predicts that he will be insulted, quote, they will say how his hair is growing thin, end quote. He also imagines that he will be in pain, quote, and when I am formulated sprawling on a pin, when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, end quote. He simultaneously tells himself there is time to act, but fears the coming of this time, and therefore never takes any opportunity. He seems to expect the future to hurt him. It is not they might say, or if I am formulated, but they will say, and when I am formulated. There's also an instance of this in the Mermaid of Fantasy. Prufrock assumes that he will not be entitled to the adventures of Odysseus. He does not get an epic poem. He expects inevitable pain and is rendered impotent due to this dread, imagining what could happen rather than living out what is actually happening. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. He does not think he deserves to take any initiative and therefore never does. The use of soliloquy, too, seems to prevent action. When Prufrock claims he is, quote, not Prince Hamlet, he could not be more correct. Hamlet is famous, or perhaps infamous, for thinking too much. Hamlet spends the majority of the play debating killing Claudius, oscillating between murder and suicide. He does not move for most of the play, but he does finally accomplish what he set out to do. Prufrock never gets past Acts 1 and 2 of Hamlet. He never stops thinking and never starts moving. He gets stuck in the soliloquy. Plot proceeds in Hamlet, but not in this poem. Prufrock relies on a series of Hamlet-esque questions that he never answers. He even seems fully aware of this problem. Quote, in a minute, there is time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse, end quote. He makes decisions, revises them, then reverses them. He could never stab Claudius because he would still be thinking about stabbing him, and the opportunity would pass. Act 5 of Hamlet never comes to Prufrock. Without committing to a decision, Prufrock cannot take action. Instead, he builds questions upon questions, going from, quote, do I dare disturb the universe, to should I, after tea and cake and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis, to do I dare to eat a peach, end quote. Before he answers one question, he finds more to consider. He cannot pick a solid answer to any question and therefore cannot create a course of action. He remains the passive questioner and not the actor because the questions never stop coming. Prufrock's insistent self-questioning begs an analysis of the repetition throughout the poem. Despite changes in topic, stanza length, etc., the speaker tends to get stuck repeating the same lines, such as, quote, how should I presume? In the room the women come and go talking of Michelangelo, and that is not it at all, end quote. Certain phrases repeat, as if Prufrock does not know what else to say. He keeps circling back to the same places no matter what. He is so impotent that he cannot even communicate a new idea. All of his contemplations result in the same words. He is as passive in his phrasing as in his deeds. He cannot, quote, descend the stair, and he also cannot craft a new line. Rhyme, too, seems to serve as a stabilizing force, keeping him from action. He wavers in and out of rhyme in several moments. The first stanza serves as an example. Quote, let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats, end quote. The first two lines serve as a couplet, but the third line, ending in table, rhymes with nothing else in the stanza. It is as if for a moment he can break out of the rhyming routine, but is not able to sustain it. He passively relies on the rhyme. This reliance continues elsewhere. Quote, should I, after tea and cake and ices, have the strength to force a moment to its crisis? Though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet, and here's no great matter, end quote. Again, the first two lines rhyme, then the speaker breaks the rhyme in the third line and resumes for the fourth and fifth. It is an attempt at a new action that ultimately fails as he returns to the comfort of his rhyme scheme. He is unable to initiate a different poetic form, just as he is unable to act upon his desires and impulses. Roy Peterson argues that the rhyme scheme throughout the poem is a subverted sonnet, claiming, quote, by mentally inserting repeated couplets in 5 more places, readers can readily see a sonnet sequence of 14 and 15-line poems, but that the sonnet, quote, disassembles into chaotic rhyme, end quote. All these instances of passivity reveal Prufrock's grim perception of the modern world, a world wrecked with war, overcrowded cities, and increasing industrial capacity has left Prufrock at a loss for words and actions. As he describes the, quote, half-deserted streets and, quote, restless nights in one-night cheap hotels, he subverts the typical setting of a love song because that setting no longer exists. Peterson adds that, quote, the humiliation and outrage of Prufrock is far too complex a problem for a single 14 or 15-line sonnet, end quote. The traditional form of a love song cannot contain the world in which Prufrock finds himself. Prufrock is inhibited by an environment that has traded nature for industry, privacy for crowds, and peace for war. The, quote, white and bare arms of the typical love song heroine have been revealed to have, quote, light brown hair, as modernity has revealed its inherent flaws. Prufrock's fantasies and daydreams seem more like nightmare visions of the modern city. He envisions an etherized patient instead of someone who is sleeping naturally, because natural behavior seems impossible when human beings are now subjected to the modern world. Society has traded love songs for a world that seems anesthetized. Romance is remade as the world is remade. Questions no longer have easy answers. To, quote, disturb the universe becomes more complicated as the universe itself modernizes. How can Prufrock, quote, presume to seek love when surrounded by the larger social concerns of industrialization, urbanization, and war? Unsure how to act in a new setting, Prufrock opts not to act at all. The love song of J. Alfred Prufrock is far from a traditional love song. Rather than depicting someone falling in love, the reader is confronted with the harsh reality of those who are too passive to find it. As the speaker overthinks and fantasizes, his chance for a relationship dwindles. It is remarkable how little can happen in the poem, and yet how much it can reveal about the modern world. Prufrock is unable to act in an action-driven society. One can only hope for the unlikely event that one day Prufrock's love song will change key. Thank you.